How madak yapi chante washte nape chayus papelo lila daya ya hipelo kola iuha ichichiab ma koche unkitra pelo lila daya yahib. I want to take this time to do a land acknowledgement for Mother Earth Day, for Earth Day. And since we're in different places, I don't know where everybody's going to be watching from, but those of you who are in Washington, D.C., recognize the Piscataway. Those of you who are in North Carolina, recognize the Lumbee and the Cherokee. Those of you who might be in what is called New York, recognize the Delaware, the Lenape, the Haudenosaunee, and any other tribal nation that might have moved since the founding of this country more than 240 years ago, which is not a long time for indigenous history or indigenous reality. When we talk about land acknowledgement, this entire country, this entire continent, this entire hemisphere is native land, indigenous land, Indian land, and acknowledging the land from which we descend, from which we originate, from which we receive our instructions and our civilizations, our ceremonies, our protocols, and our walks on Mother Earth. We do much more than just name and acknowledge the land. We recognize our relationship, our responsibility, and our obligation to protect and defend Mother Earth, to protect and defend our sacred metaphysics, our power, our ways of knowing, our ways of understanding who and what we are. So in strength, I want to say, Blihichiapo mitakiapi. That means take courage. It's my honor and privilege to be with you today.
For those who know somebody with asthma, stand up. You know you have asthma. Now, it's almost everybody. Now, if you know somebody, if you're already standing, and you double, if you're somebody who has had cancer, raise your hands. Okay. This is our issue. This is our issue. Keep standing. If you've lost somebody to cancer or to asthma, have a seat. Everybody else sit down. Thank you. This is our issue. We're done. Not a game. And they know. One of the things I had to do was a 14-year-old girl in D.C. who was in the hood in an area called Southeast. She was the one of the most important people in her family, like that little girl in her family who was doing it all. Her mother had to play Russian roulette, besides getting money for her family or getting that inhaler for her daughter. Well, she lost, and her daughter had an asthma attack and died. The entire time I was doing that funeral, her mama was trying to climb into the casket. The entire time I was trying to lay this girl to rest, who shouldn't have been dead because of all those things that were put in place. Here I was burying this girl, her mama's trying to climb into the casket. Now I, like you, was wanting to do all the things that are revolutionary on every single corner. But when I understood then that the enemy has gotten much more sophisticated. It ain't this Jim Crow with a straw hat. I can say it's James Crow Jr. Esquire. Much more sophisticated.
For the next 9 minutes and 29 seconds, the amount of time that Officer Derek Chauvin held his knee on George Floyd's neck, I will guide you through this mindful meditation and breath work to honor his life and those of countless others who have died from police brutality, pollution, poverty, the pandemic, and ineffective policies that don't consider the BIPOC community. This process is designed to center us as we begin the We Shall Breathe Summit and allow us to give life through our breath to the change we wish to see. Before we begin, make sure you are in a position that is comfortable to you. You may be lying or sitting. Close your eyes and reduce the distractions around you. As we work through this guided mindful meditation, I will count off each minute up to 9 minutes and 29 seconds. You will change your pattern of breathing, guided by my direction, at the beginning of each minute. Minute 1. Settle into your position and begin to breathe normally. Notice the feeling of your breath entering and leaving your body. Notice the sensations on your skin. Notice the sensations within your body. Breathe in deeply from your belly, pulling the energy from your feet to your chest. Release your breath slowly through your nose, allowing your breath to be released through your body. First from your chest, then your stomach. Finally, release it through your feet. Minute 2. Take another deep breath from your belly, pulling the energy from your feet to your chest. Hold your breath for 5 seconds. Release your breath slowly through your nose, allowing your breath to be released through your body, first from your chest, then your stomach, finally through your feet. Breathe normally. Bring your attention to your feelings, paying particular attention to your thoughts on the death of those slain by police officers and the policies that continue to allow it to happen. What emotions are beneath those feelings? Name the emotions out loud. Minute 3. If you notice the temptation to get lost in the story, gently return to the emotion. Continue breathing normally. Hang your head forward, releasing all tension from your neck and shoulders. Roll your head clockwise, then counterclockwise. Emotions can show up in the body and feel like fluttering, clenching, physical pain, or spiritual unease. Take a deep breath, pulling energy from your feet. Hold it for 10 seconds. Minute 4. Release your breath, first from your chest, then your stomach, finally through your feet. Continue breathing normally. Now pay attention to where these emotions live in your body and spirit. Is there any place in your spirit or on your body where you feel tension, tingling, tightness. Note those places and the feelings, but don't try to change anything. Be curious and compassionate in the moment with your feelings. Take a deep breath, pulling energy from your feet. Hold it for 15 seconds. Release your breath, first from your chest, then your stomach, finally through your feet. Minute 5. Continue breathing normally. Now bring your focus to your feelings on pollution and poverty. Consider how they are interconnected. Sit with this awareness of their interconnectedness. Take a deep breath, pulling energy from your feet. Hold it for 20 seconds. Minute 6. Release your breath, first from your chest, then your stomach, finally your feet. Consider your feelings on the pandemic. Out loud, name your concerns, fears, and worries about the aftermath of the pandemic. Don't try to fix anything. Just bring awareness to these things. Take a deep breath, pulling energy from your feet. Hold it for 5 seconds. Minute 7. Release your breath, first from your chest, then your stomach, finally through your feet. What feelings have you acknowledged during this exercise? Where are those feelings living in your body? When faced with painful emotions, did you try to run away from them? During difficult moments, we often try to push the negative feelings away. Take a deep breath from your belly, pulling energy from your feet. Hold it for 5 seconds. Minute 8. Release your breath, first from your chest, then your stomach, finally through your feet. Don't push your feelings away. Turn toward them. Use some of the feelings you had to finish these sentences. This is a moment of discomfort that I cannot avoid discomfort in this life because I care about this suffering because. Now, take a deep breath, pulling energy from your feet, and hold it for 10 seconds. Minute 9. Release your breath, first from your chest, then your stomach, finally through your feet. Breathe normally. Let's now shift our energy from focusing on the problem to being the change. We will repeat several affirmations. Repeat after me. I am powerful. I am brave. I am forgiving. I am empowered. I am valuable. I am change. Let's take one last deep breath. Pull from your chest, deep in your belly, pulling energy from your feet. Hold. Release your breath, first from your chest, then your stomach, finally through your feet. Ashe.
Rock back and forth, you know what I mean? Like, loosen up, yeah. So this song is called Never Change. It's off my first self-titled debut. I feel you, and that'll never change. Wanna be near you, and that'll never change. Baby, I got you, and that'll never change. I think I love you, and that'll never change. Oh, I got your back. Wonder one day if I'll wake up and see a different you. One that makes me feel all giddy again and brand new. Ooh, not another lover, but an extension of who I come to love. Ooh, sugar, please do. Keep growing, keep showing me that you gon' be the man that I want. Keep loving me and tugging at my heartstrings. Yeah, keep telling me the real, reminding me another lover just won't do. There's something about you, and I want us to keep doing what we do. I feel you, and that'll never change. Wanna be near you, yeah, and that'll never change. Ooh, baby, I got you. That'll never change. I think I love you, and that'll never change. Oh, I got your back. If you ever needed anything, you know you could call on me, baby. No, ain't nobody could open their mouth and make me believe that you don't know me, and that you don't love me better than the next could ever. But we make it two forever, yeah. Keep growing, keep showing me that you're gonna be the man that I want. Keep loving me and tugging at my heartstrings, yeah. Keep telling me the real, reminding me another lover just won't do. Something about you, and I want us to keep doing what we do. Cause I feel you, I feel you, and that'll never change. Wanna be you, yes, you and you, that'll never change. I got you, that'll never change. I think I love you, and that'll never change.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Nikisha Glover, and I'm the Think 100% organizer for Hip Hop Caucus. Today, we are joined by some phenomenal guests that will guide us through what we are calling the 5 Ps: pollution, the pandemic, poverty, police brutality, and policy. Our first panel is pollution, and we are joined by the National Black Environmental Justice Network.
The National Black Environmental Justice Network is a national coalition of environmental justice organizations and activists of African descent.
So NBEJN is a network created by the grassroots to ensure that the hyper-capitalistic models, that have been applied to industry is not so much applied to our work. The only thing we really care about is our community and the people who are on the front lines and the vulnerable population. We care about their safety and their well-being.
So the name of this summit is called We Shall Breathe. I'd like to hear from you all about why can't we breathe?
We have been having trouble breathing. When we were in the bellies of the ships crossing the Atlantic coming here, we had struggles breathing. We had struggles breathing while we were on the plantation because of the life on the plantation, because of the work we were doing. We had struggle breathing. We have struggle breathing today because of the pollution. We have struggle breathing because the police is on our necks.
Most of our communities, especially those along the fence line, the residents in those communities literally cannot breathe. Africatown, where I come from, Africatown, Alabama, is surrounded right now by 15 industries. And 3 of those industries are the top pollution industries in Mobile County. Even though we were down south on the Gulf Coast, we got real snow. But it didn't melt when it hit the ground. It just stayed there, and it would rust out your car.
Anybody like to take a moment to talk about what We Shall Breathe means to you?
Relaunch, because we're tired of fighting, still in the background, and we're saying, as Black people, we shall breathe, we shall live, whatever it takes.
I think about the story of a 4-year-old named Xavier Joe, who lived right outside of Detroit, Michigan. And one day, him and his little brother were out playing in the backyard. His mom was watching from the kitchen. Her sons got asthma attacks, both of them at the same time. She ran upstairs looking for the inhalers, and she began to have an asthma attack herself. There was only enough in the inhaler for 2. That day, 4-year-old Xavier Joe died, and his mother had to choose which one of her kids would live. So when we talk about We Shall Breathe, we understand it as an acute crisis, not some slowly creeping crisis that's going to kill us 20 or 30 years from the line, but a crisis that's killing us today. And we shall breathe, right? We're owning that.
Tell us about the story of pollution in Black communities.
Africatown, as most people know, is the place where the last shipment of slaves came into this country just before the Civil War. And so they were only slaves for 5 years. So the former government they set up was like a tribe back in Africa. They had a chief, medicine man, and all that stuff, and they took care of each other. 100 years later, in 1960, they decided to become part of the city of Mobile. And so the city began to divide the sections with highways, the rezoning stuff to put more industry in there, to harm us even more, to drive us out of there. People born after 1945 are not living to age 70.
Tell us more about the pollution fights we're up against, and what approach do you recommend to solve the pollution crisis?
I really want to frame it within, the demands of NBEJN, right? So, when we talk about, in the deregulation campaign, when we talk about, making sure that we have access to natural environments with clean air, clean water, healthy food, quality jobs, that's a question of agency. We can't have this conversation without talking about, our communities need deep financial investments, right?
We need a restoration, we need repair, and we need reparations. I mean, it's simple as that. We need to be paid to fix up our communities. It's because everybody has taken out of these communities. They've taken out the resources, they've used everything up, and then people have to remain in these communities trying to survive every day. They need to be paid back.
I'm so glad that Simone brought up reparations. And oftentimes, it's talked about within this context of, we deserve reparations from what happened to our ancestors in slavery. And hell yeah, we do, right? But I think to not extend that conversation into today does us a disservice. This is what's happening to us now and today, and those are inherently environmental justice issues.
We don't want when our communities are cleaned up, they're all of a sudden gentrified and we can't live in there. So we don't want that.
Y'all better come through. Y'all better tell the truth. Y'all better tell the truth. Is there anything else you would like everyone to know that I didn't ask?
You know, I really want to make this point about power. And, you know, I think it is oftentimes taken in a derogatory sense to maintain power, to hold power. But, you know, power in nature is neutral. It's how it's used that determines whether it's good or it's bad. We got to take back our power, right? We can't be waiting for someone to empower us. You feel me? So, you know, I just want to remind people that, you know, power is not given, it is taken, and the time is now.
There's a very popular phrase going around that says, two popular phrases. One is all lives matter and Black lives matter. And I know my life matter. And so I think yours do too.
We can tell our own story now, and we want it to be a bright story, one where we are thriving, not just barely breathing.
Not just one when we're barely breathing.
This is Angela Harris from Newport News. She has watched generations around her be poisoned by the plants in Newport and has started fighting back.
And when we started looking at the environment, we were able to see that this plant right here is releasing toluene into the air. This impact, this is why we having strokes, this is why we have psoriasis, this is why we having heart problems, asthma. You know, babies having strokes now.
You got the coal yard over here. You got the mica plant, you got the Chase Bag Company, and you have the ship yard. The ones that live over here in those projects over there, the parents worked the shipyard. That's right. So they had a triple whammy. They had the coal dust, they had the sandblasting and stuff from the shipyard, and they had the Chase Bag Company.
All our elders that lived in these apartments behind, and we'll go around and show you the apartments. All these people were being basically killed and didn't even know.
The children of those parents that I grew up with, a lot of them contracted asthma, asbestosis, and most of their parents died from that, the husbands and the wives. I had 3 uncles that worked the shipyard that were diagnosed with asbestosis.
Cancer Alley, Stroke Alley, a food desert, and it's some more stuff. So they basically left us here to die.
Running in the midnight, running till we get tired, running till the end.
The desperation in Angela's voice is so real. Can you imagine knowing that you are breathing poisonous air every day?
Get tired, running till the end.
This is the coal yard. You see the whole operation. You can see there is no glass ceiling. So everything that's being done is just going straight into the air. Those sprinkler system is what they put up there, and those sprinklers are supposed to contain the coal dust and all that type of stuff. That little sprinkler system right there.
Are you serious?
Yes. These cars that you see right here, they go over to the coal thing over here. They shut the coal down in this thing, and then this railroad actually goes all the way through the community. Because he's on the phone, I know he called the police. And we're coming in peace, so we're just going to leave in peace.
And I just want to give a shout out to the Hip Hop Caucus and, to invite us into this dialogue and discussion. My role here is really to elevate and uplift really the core of the Moving Forward Network, which is the membership.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. P. Kasima Boston, and my organization is the Tallahassee Food Network. I'm a trained public health specialist, professional, but I'm also an artist. I make Shakerades and I make doll stories and I dance.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly Amaya, and I'm from West Long Beach, which is an occupied Tongva territory. And I'm a member of ECR Communities for Environmental Justice. And right now, I'm currently a college student.
How do you see your organizations really fitting into the Moving Forward Network, and And how do you connect the dots, and what's your role there?
The organization that I work with fits into the MFN network agenda, in that environment, air, water, the earth are all connected to good food, right? I'm finding in my work to connect with others that most communities are impacted by the same injustice when it comes to environment. In fact, that environmental injustice impacts primarily communities of color. This is a national movement or struggle for justice and equality. So that's how we connect to the Moving Forward Network.
So the summit is called We Shall Breathe. I guess the question is, why is it that we can't breathe?
It really just relates to all the dirty air and pollution that our communities have to breathe in, and the high rates of asthma that we've been seeing in kids in our communities. Like, they're just trying to play and have fun like any normal kid, but they can't. They have to watch their activity intake, and it's it's really not fair for them.
It's frustrating, and it just puts a fire in us.
Oh, when I think of We Shall Breathe, I think about mothers, because I think about George Floyd, who was calling for his mama. And so I can also relate that to calling for Mother Earth's help, because we can't breathe because of the challenges that we have with industries that they put a bigger value on money than on lives. I think about my friend Tom Lomax, who has his family home, and right in front of his doorway is a railway where they're transporting goods every day in and out right in front of his house. So he's breathed that air, that exhaust from that railway ever since he was a little boy, and he's 72 years old now, still lives in the same house. So when I think about breathing, I think about George Floyd calling for his mama, and I think about us calling on Mother Earth for help.
Tell us a little bit about stories of pollution in your fight in your communities.
Yeah, so in West Long Beach, we're kind of surrounded by polluting facilities. So we have the big 710 freeway. We have another 405 freeway on the north. And then on towards the West Coast, we have 2 ports, the Los Angeles port and the Long Beach port. And we have refineries also not less than 5 miles from my community. And with the ports, it brings in a lot of truck traffic and all of those diesel fumes. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the communities, the Black and brown working class communities, are next to all of these polluting facilities. How is it that we are having to breathe in all this air? But then I noticed that in a refinery in El Segundo, they have a really big barrier. They have a bunch of trees and greenery. And even then, it's apartments that they put first, closer to the refinery. And then it's the nice big houses. When we talk about the ways forward, I think we have to think about the systems and the structures that are existing, because these exposure situations didn't just manifest yesterday. They go back in history. And so for me, when I think about going forward, we have to think about creating different systems and different structures that work fairly for everyone, so that we can rearrange it and make sure everybody's at that table to get the different ideas and opinions and thoughts and inspirations there and included in the restructuring and the changing of systems. So that's my thinking on that.
As you know, we had a recent shift in our presidential administration. What do you want to put forth to make sure the administration hears you loud and clear that needs to happen? Definitely listening and putting frontline communities first. Listen to what BIPOC people are saying, because we know we have that knowledge, we have the expertise, and really transitioning out of the oil and gas infrastructure and into renewable energy systems. And also starting zero waste practices, which is stopping our dependence on landfills and incinerators, and moving more towards reusable and refill systems.
I go to the grocery store and every single little bread has a plastic wrap.
What I would ask is that they consider erecting something called dream boards in every community. And everyone in that community can see their dreams. And those dreams rotate by month. So everybody gets a chance to put their dream on that big billboard. Because our communities, because we're faced with challenges of social issues, all of them, housing, mental health, all of these different things, economics, income, all of these, we're not taking the time to dream boards in every community where people can be reminded to dream.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a climate change. Oh, it's a real cold game. I feel it, climate change. The hood will never be the same. I said, I feel it, climate change. Oh, it's a real cold game. I feel it, climate change. The hood will never be the same. I said, I feel it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Shadows and they watching. I've been low, going up is the only option. I wanna know how to fly. If I fall below, at least I try. You never know when it's time. I know the soul never dies. What don't kill me, make me smaller, make me harder. When it's yours, you gon' know, cause it flow like water. If I got life, I don't live, then why I'm living? If you got life, but you don't live, then why you living?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pandemic section of the We Shall Breathe Summit. We are here today with Youth versus Apocalypse and Generation Green. What is Generation Green?
Our mission at Generation Green is to foster an intergenerational network, community, and platform that fortifies youth leadership in the environmental liberation movement throughout the African diaspora.
What is Youth versus Apocalypse? Please let us know.
First of all, I just want to say I love Generation Green. Like, I've been watching from the sidelines. Y'all are so saucy. I'm like, and I'm about to go to Howard. So, Pete, we about to link up. It's about to be a link up. Okay, come on. Youth versus Apocalypse is a climate justice organization based in the Bay Area.
We have 6 different campaigns. All these campaigns are mobilizing youth to really take radical climate action.
What does We Shall Breathe mean to you?
It takes me back to last summer. We had, COVID-19. It's affecting Black folks significantly more. And then on top of that, we already know as Black folks that there is white supremacy is killing us every day. And obviously with George Floyd's death, I will say that it was specifically when he said the words, "I can't breathe," and his life was taken away, his breath was taken away from him, and his life was taken away from him. I think it just made us reflect on just how many levels where we have that basic activity that sustains our life is being taken away from us.
We Shall Breathe really means to push through all those things and to really fight through it and to really fight for a world where Black people are able to thrive. It's really a call to action.
I had COVID, so this pandemic has really told me that your ability to breathe is really your life force. So not only on top of that is it physically harming you, but spiritually, your life force is like impacted by environmental racism. And a new word that was introduced to me is syndemic, right? And what allows all these other health conditions to exacerbate COVID. And where I'm from in the Bronx, to me, that it can only be pointed to two things, which is air pollution, which is the root cause of the highest cases of asthma in New York, and obesity from the lack of access to food and living in food apartheid. Just we shall breathe is the idea that we will continue to resist to maintain and protect our life force by any means necessary.
Girl, I was over here like breathing deep. I was like, yes, come on, life force energy.
How would you describe the pandemic and its effects on you? And then also in the terms of a syndemic, which you all have described, how are your organizations addressing that syndemic?
I think this pandemic has been, devastating for a lot of families, a lot of people. But I also think it's been a wake-up call for really everyone. People think, that the pandemic is sort of the reason for everything that's bad happening right now. But all these bad things have been happening for years now. And so, people are looking at this, oh, now we have to do something. But, Black youth, Indigenous youth have been taking action.
Like what we are experiencing right now is our unsustainable foundation of white supremacy and colonialism and capitalism and patriarchy and ableism crumbling. And the question is, are we going to rebuild the exact same system that has brought us to where we are? Or are we going to build something new that is based in justice and equity and true sustainability?
Give folks a story or an idea of Black youth in the climate movement. What's the story of that? What does that look like from your personal experiences?
It's a story that's just now beginning because it hasn't always been for Black youth, and it hasn't been, centered and led by Black youth. So, I think Black youth are now starting to realize that, the climate crisis is so much more than bees dying. It's people dying, our people dying, people who look like me are dying and are getting years taken off their lives because of so many different effects from the climate crisis. Black youth are really taking the torch and, really claiming that this is a movement that has to be led by Black people in order for it to be a successful movement, but also a true movement.
That's it. That's all. We done. Bye.
You answered that question and my next question. This is the future. This is the future.
Black women are less likely to survive COVID-19, and the widest margin between the two groups by gender and race are between Black women and white men in terms of the care that they receive, the difference in the death rates. We would be remiss if we didn't start with that reality for so many folks.
What we have with COVID-19, what we've seen in the last year plus is a racialized crisis because our economy and our society is built upon the genocide of Indigenous peoples and anti-Black racism and white supremacy. Black, Indigenous, Latinx, immigrant communities were the ones who have been most affected by the COVID-19 crisis, by disease, by death, and being on the front lines, right? Like the majority of frontline workers are people of color, and particularly women of color, that have worked to uphold the economy during this period of contraction. So when we're talking about the kinds of intervention we need to lift ourselves back out of this crisis, we cannot separate that from undoing the generations of inequality that brought us to this place, the generations of white supremacy that have brought us to this place.
What is Thrive? Where does it come from? And what does it do?
Yeah, so we have Congress members who are introducing the Thrive Act, which is a vision for an economic recovery that addresses the climate crisis, rebuilding our economy by creating millions of good jobs for people who need it the most, and addressing injustice, racial injustice, environmental injustice. And the Thrive Act, it introduces a $10 trillion recovery plan, $1 trillion every year for 10 years. And that would be attached to that a set of standards so that the jobs that are created, and we have a report from the Political Economy Research Institute and the Sierra Club that shows that this package would create over 15 million jobs during this decade, and that those would be high quality jobs and will go to the communities that need it the most. And we want to attach to those jobs a set of standards, right? That they are upholding a transition, a just and equitable transition off the fossil fuel economy and building a regenerative and renewable energy economy. And that has to be part of the solutions, particularly to this concrete, acute economic crisis that we're in. But we know that this is just the beginning of the economic transformation we need to get into an economy that moves away from exploitation and extraction and towards recovery and regeneration.
In my lifetime, and heck, in the lifetime of any president who's ever been in the United States, the American Jobs Act did a couple of things that I thought were pretty interesting. One, which was recognize that elimination of racial and gender gaps in research and development, in science and technology, in engineering and math are things that nobody has ever admitted we have before. Proposal also said U.S. innovation will quadruple if women and people of color and children were given the space to invent at the rate of white men. If you add to that the idea that Joe Biden wants to get rid of lead lines everywhere, this is the sort of thing that has a multi-generational impact. Where's the nuance between what the administration is saying it wants to do and what the Thrive agenda is calling for?
It's a huge shift for us to have a president and administration that says this, like racial equality has to be part of how we're building the economy. That is huge, how we're rebuilding the economy. I laugh a little bit about a $2 trillion plan, which is what the American Jobs Plan is, because the cost of climate crisis alone, there are studies that show will cost the U.S. economy $1 trillion per year, or over $1 trillion per year. So it barely gets to the scratching the surface, this plan. And I think we have to be able to say, here are the things that you have outlaid that are great, that are setting the trajectory for where we need to go. And we want you to do more. And we need massive investments on the scale of trillions upon trillions of dollars. And that's what the Thrive Act does. It has been put together by the Green New Deal Network, a national coalition of labor, of environmental groups, of racial justice groups, and political organizations. So this is a vision that is actually described by the people who are most harmed for what we need. This is us saying, this is what we need. And if Joe Biden says, here's $2 trillion, and here's the ways that I think about it, we can say, like, that's a good start. And we need more.
We're in a syndemic, and since we could be crushed by the pandemic or climate or failed infrastructure or all three of them happening at the same time in a context of America that's been raised by the last president and has to be rebuilt, this idea of building back better is about recognizing all of the nuance that you raised. So it has been my pleasure to have a conversation with you, Adrienne Salazar.
I am so honored to be with two powerful Black women. Yes, I say it proudly, and I say it with such passion.
My name is Jackie Patterson. I am with NAACP's Environmental and Climate Justice Program.
Melanie Campbell
It's good to be here with my sister Jackie and you, my brother, representing National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and Black Women's Roundtable.
When the pandemic hit, it affected every area that we was in. And we have seen how pandemic has been affected by pollution. We've seen how pandemic been affected by policy. Some people are still waiting on their stimulus check. And, just a whole bunch of things. And even in the pandemic, we watched the whole issue of George Floyd. What does it mean when I say we shall breathe? And the other question behind that would be, why can't we breathe?
Having gone through that struggle and been blessed to survive COVID. So the notion of someone who felt I was pretty healthy, had my struggles, but to be in a position where you really literally could not breathe, because the ability to breathe means you can survive a pandemic. A lot of the people who passed away died because they could not get a handle on the ability to breathe. So the idea of external things like COVID, but then external things like what's happening in your own community has a whole other meaning for me that I'm still, quite honestly, working through.
Based on what we've seen from other crises, whether it's Hurricane Katrina or just the patterns of inequity, I sat down and spent 19 hours straight and wrote this document, the 10 equity implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. We know what the patterns of inequity already are. We know that our communities already can't breathe. We need a total system change and total revolution. So we're already starting to see that, whether it's the defunding of the police in Minneapolis and the reforming of that system, or whether it's the fact that across the country we have folks who are growing their own food, generating their own energy. The awesome work, in a nutshell.
One of the things I always say is that people say we're in a pandemic. No, we're continuing a pandemic. How has the pandemic impacted the work that we have to do for organizing?
It initially, because we were in the middle of dealing with the primary election and the census, right? So, and then trying to figure out, thinking it's going to be something short term, all the things that we all have lived through. But at some point we realized, okay, we've got to figure out how to reimagine the work. And I'm just talking just like the granular part of just getting out the vote, educating folks, giving them the information. So social media has never been my big strength, but we had to figure it out. Right? There was a lot of decisions made on the ground to find ways to canvass and still do the traditional things that we do to get out the vote and to do that safely. We didn't really understand that what was happening in somebody else's country could happen here. Unfortunately, a lot of times we function like whatever happens somewhere else won't ever happen here. But we woke up to that reality that we're in a global situation.
COVID-19 has actually deepened those conversations around total system change. So on the one hand, and then even from a practical standpoint, interestingly enough, moving to virtual has increased access and engagement in some ways.
What are some demands or recommendations for the Biden administration? He's going to have leaders, 40 world leaders on the summit on climate in April, on April 22nd for Earth Day. But what are some things that you would recommend or demand that the Biden administration, pushing up on 100 days, that they should do around this issue of pandemic?
What we're concerned about, and I just had this meeting yesterday, you all know, and all of our organizations were together, NACP, Hip Hop, and several others, around voting, the voting rights. So it's not just the administration, but it's also the Congress, and it's also the corporate world. It's also the fact that our voting rights, that's the pandemic on our democracy and our ability to move our agenda. Whatever we want to get done, if we can't nonpartisanly get anything legislation moved, then we're just setting up for more frustration, right? Just getting the work done on the Hill.
Right.
And so to me, voting rights are like core to that, and getting John Lewis bill passed, getting the People for the People Act passed. Right. What happened in Georgia is just itself, all the good and all the challenges are on one state that represent what's happening all over the country. 43 states that have decided they want to change their rules because Black and brown people voted, because young people voted, and you don't like the decision that was made. And history has shown us that we have to continue to fight.
Definitely to restore the environmental policies that were rolled back by the prior administration, and not only restore, but to strengthen.
The voting piece is definitely a part that we will be jumping on because we have to shape the policies. And like you said, Jack, we got to restore the policy that we put into place and to make sure that we're protected under these policies. So any other closing remarks that you may want to share?
If you can get a shot, get that shot for COVID-19 so you can survive it.
Incinerator right here. I like to call this thing a monster right here. And I like to start off every tour. Can we get a big boo for this thing? Boo! Okay, this is the United States' largest solid waste incinerator right here. And it has been a thorn in Detroit's side since it was created, since it was built. Detroit did not produce enough garbage or waste to keep this incinerator running efficiently. So what they began to do is they began to allow other communities to come in, bring their waste here, and burn right here in the middle of Detroit. Now, the thing about that is, in a half-a-mile radius of this incinerator, there are 10 schools. There's also the Detroit Medical Center, less than a half-a-mile away from here. Now, this incinerator spews toxic ash, lead, cadmium, and dioxins. Dioxins are the most deadly chemical known to man. When it gets hot, especially in the summer, this whole area reeks of trash. It's a very heavy smell, and people should not have to live like that.
Lead poisoning in kids directly correlates to drops in IQ and aggressive behavior later on in life. The single number one factor that correlated most exactly to juvenile misbehavior and early adulthood incarceration was whether they had been lead poisoned as a child, whether they had had elevated levels of lead in their blood, which has nothing to do with parenting or anything like that. It's to do with whether they grew up in a neighborhood that had industrial lead in the soil and whether they were exposed to that lead as a kid. A place like Detroit, you got 90% of your low-income housing was built before lead paint was banned. It's damaging children in our communities, and it's seriously impacting not just, pollution, asthma, whatever, it's impacting the crime rate. If we had no lead poisoning, you would see a dramatic reduction in crime.
Detroit is a kind of advanced form of American apartheid. In the downtown economy, it's ball games, it's casinos, and it's prisons.
The city has not put any money in this community, I'd say in the last 20 years. So these industries self-report. That means they can send in the information. Service Stall, I don't know if, did you tell them they had 36 violations? And they're probably going to give them the go-ahead to pollute more. What we need is advocacy. So we've got a lot of people in this neighborhood that are angry because they get emotional about Marathon, and rightfully so, because it is basically destroying a community. We only have one elementary school now in the neighborhood. We used to have 4. Actually grew up in this neighborhood, went to Southwestern High School, which is now closed for the bridge. And who knew when you're growing up that you want to move to a place where jobs are plentiful, but you don't know the impact later in life that it's going to have on you. And I think we're finding that out every place we go where there's an old plant. But I'm talking maybe in a matter of 6 to 8 months, they've torn down houses like I've never seen a place tear down houses. And everything else that you see over on your right, brand new, the silo, all of that is part of Marathon's 2 $2.2 billion heavy oil expansion project that they just completed. $2.2 billion. The Sierra Club did a white picket fence initiative. They wanted everybody in the community to put a white cross in their yard for anybody in their family who had cancer. Almost every yard in this community had a white cross. Yeah, all of this is Marathon. They gave them a $179 million tax abatement to build this $2.2 billion project with the promise of jobs. Well, when it was all tallied up this year, they found out that they hired 15 Detroiters. $179 million for 15 jobs. 4 or 5 years ago, this didn't exist. This all came with the $2.2 billion expansion. Who wants to be the elected official that says, I'm not about jobs? Well, we have a saying in our neighborhood because we've never seen a job cure cancer. That's right. You guys smell that? Imagine having to live with that every day. Imagine a hot day. There are more incidents of asthma, cancer, respiratory deals in this community than anywhere else in the state.
And look at all the smoke.
Now, it was originally Aurora Oil in the 30s. 59, it became Marathon. My goal is to make this situation better for the people that are here. You know, if people stop running to better places and make the place that you are in better, then we wouldn't have all of these problems. And I appreciate you covering your nose. That says to me, it's real. But I would love for you all to come here on a hot July day when some people who don't have air conditioning can't open up their windows and they have to suffocate and suffer. So I appreciate you all taking the time. I got to get out and go back home. I live down the street from here, so like we say, when Marathon farts, we smell it.
Thank you so much, Darren.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've introduced myself. My name is Mamadou Njai, if you were wondering. And if you are white, my name is unpronounceable. It's wonderful. We're here doing a climate crisis event. I often get to go to a lot of climate crisis events, and I'm the only black person in those rooms, even though we are the ones that are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis, which is messed up. And I want to tell you just a report from these white climate crisis rooms, what they worry about. Straws. Straws are the first one. Oil. Sea turtles. Black people. It's not a good order. It's not great. I don't know a sea turtle. Do you know a sea turtle? Do you know a sea turtle? No, none of y'all know sea turtles. I'll say, I don't give a fuck about sea turtles when we out here dealing with the repercussions of this, you know? But you know what I do care about? Ninja Turtles. You see, if you really want me to care about turtles, you got to get me in a movie theater and I see Raphael, Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Donatello was killed by oil. Like that will mess me up. Like I would really fix things yesterday, you know what I'm saying? It's difficult. A few fun facts about me. I have a degree in neuroscience, which it was I'll take it. It was definitely much cooler before Ben Carson, I'll tell you that. It was way cooler. It was way, way cooler to be a black neuroscientist. I got that degree. I'm like, yes, I'm about to change the world. Then he goes, yo, slaves are immigrants. I'm like, you know what? Let me just run this back. Let me run back college, all of it.
I can't breathe. I stand here in the spirit of my sister, who fought for justice until her dying day for my father. Standing outside protesting. 5 years later and there's still no justice. So no, there won't be no calm, no justice, no peace.
There's an easy way to stop it. Arrest the cops. Charge the cops. Charge all the cops. Charge them in every city across America where our people are being murdered. Do your job. Do what you say. This country is supposed to be about the land of the free for all. It has not been free for black people, and we are tired. Don't talk to us about looting. Y'all are the looters. America has looted Black people. America looted the Native Americans when they first came here.
I don't get to go back to New York City or to LA or to all these places then and get lost in whatever. I have to go home to where the cancer is, to where we are still being killed off.
We know what the injustice have done to us and those we love. But to overcome them, we have to stand in solidarity. We have to listen to each other and know that we always have more to learn. There's an entry point for all of us to be involved in this movement. So get involved, stay involved, and keep your eyes on the prize.
We are the conscience of these United States of America. We are this nation's moral compass. If you want to know if you are going the right way, follow women of color, sisters and brothers. We know where we need to go, and we know where justice is, because when we fight for justice, we fight for it for all people, for all our communities.
And never in a million years would I think that would happen to my father. It would spark the nationwide, global, protests and everything. And never would I thought it would be our family. Everybody could be Eric Garner. It's a lot of Eric Garners out there. A lot of innocent people being beat down by police. And we're not gonna stop until we receive justice.
Hello, my name is Emerald Smith Garner. I'm the youngest daughter of Eric Garner. I do a lot of work surrounding making awareness of police brutality after the death of my father in 2014. He was murdered by former police officer Daniel Pantaleo. We need to let people know how the officers look as well so that they can be easily identified on the streets, as opposed to us just being the face of the case. We are not the case. The case is the officers.
My name is Linda Sarsour. I am a Palestinian Muslim American activist and organizer stationed out here in Brooklyn, New York. And I've committed myself to this idea and this philosophy that when Black people are free, everybody's going to be free.
My name is Chase Iron Eyes. I'm living on the Pine Ridge Reservation. I was raised on the Standing Rock Nation, the Standing Rock Reservation, involved in creating as a synergy movement, Native Lives Matter. There's a lot of gravity associated with us in the work that we're committing ourselves to.
What does it mean to you when I say we shall breathe?
Everybody knows that, I suffer with chronic asthma and, my father's situation. So when I watched that video, it was heart-wrenching for me because I'm just like, I could see what it was. It was an asthma attack. And it's just like, I know what that feels like when you can't breathe. I've been in the hospital over 100 times because of my asthma, having my first asthma attack at 9 months. And the first thing they tell you, you don't wear things that constrict your neck. And then to see it again with George Floyd is just like, it's utterly ridiculous. And now it's like I have to be on the front lines and see his wife, see his kids, everybody's family on the front line. And it's just heartbreaking that time and time again, this is what happens. This summit is important to me because I renamed my foundation and revamped everything about my foundation, about my nonprofit to call it We Can't Breathe Incorporated. And I'm ready to get the work done because it's needed. This is needed.
I love this idea of we shall breathe because it's actually a mantra for all of our movement. I see we shall breathe as a vision, a vision that I want, a world that I want to live in, a world where we can all breathe freely. I want to thrive and I want to see my neighbors and my people and my communities and the cities that I live in and the country that I live in thrive.
Emerald, you said something very powerful that I want to go back and could you kind of go a little bit farther into what you were saying as you were talking about your whole family having asthma and the situation that you were discussing?
Yes. So with Erica, her asthma developed later in life. For me, everything that happened with Erica was strictly mental health. We never had the chance to grieve. It was straight from, my father went into the hospital freezer, and 2 days later we were in front of the news. So it's like nobody stopped to get us mental health services, and she did not survive the movement. That's why I started We Can't Breathe, because we don't have mental health services readily available to us.
And Chase, I want to come to you. Can you just give us some story of police brutalities in your community?
When the reservations were started, when they were created, we call them okashke, oyanke, places of confinement. They created these things called courts of Indian offenses for doing traditional indigenous ceremonies like a sweat lodge or a Sundance. We were completely criminalized. You talked about Standing Rock. I mean, we witnessed corporate sponsored, state executed police brutality. We were also victims of COINTELPRO. There was a running massacre on the Pine Ridge Reservation during the 1970s. Almost 100 people, my family members, were murdered. Alan Locke, he was murdered, death by cop, right when Ferguson was burning. He would have shot 5 times in the chest and the neck in front of his family. Out here where I live, we're 10% of the city of Rapid City's population, but we fill their jails at 54%. All children in custody of the Department of Social Services, we comprise more than 52% of all children in state custody. We didn't choose to be born on this side of privilege and oppression. We've got to stand up always.
Something that you and I both share is we're both Muslims. A big segment of the communities we're a part of, which are 1/3 Black, and they're Black Muslims. When we think about the murder of Stephon Clark out in Sacramento, Stephon Clark was a Muslim. When we look at our incarceration population, the many Black Muslims that are in there, and some of them who are political prisoners, like when we think about H. Rap Brown, Imam Jamil, who's literally dying in prison right now. He's sick and he's a political prisoner. Abolition sounds like you're against something, but abolition for me is a world that is full of joy, and a world where we shall all breathe and thrive without police and without prisons.
What demands or recommendations do you want to put forth to the Biden administration?
Police are protected by these laws. Everything is a law. Like, this is not against the law, but this is banned. This is illegal, but this is banned. This is not illegal, this is banned. You didn't see this, but this is what you saw. So I think that clear articulation and legislation is definitely what is needed. The Eric Garner law was passed in New York State. We need laws that protect us. We need laws that, put everything on the forefront, like, 50A being repealed. Like, we need that. We need to know what goes on in these courtrooms. I demand that the Biden administration pass the Eric Garner law federally as an executive order. We can start there.
Biden can, for example, as a president, have the authority to engage in clemency, a clemency application to allow federal prisoners to apply, for clemency based on drug offenses. President Biden came in and started talking about, I'm going to end this idea of private prisons. Anywhere from the classes that they mandate people to take that are private contractors, even to the devices that they give people who are under house arrest. There's too many people profiting off of the incarceration system. And the biggest power that the president has and President Biden has is the pulpit that he has, right? Is the platform that he has. We need him to be a champion. We need him to be talking about evidence-based policing. We need to be talking about not giving police departments who have a history of discrimination and racist and racial profiling any federal resources. He can't do everything, and we understand that, but he has the authority to do many things that can help us move onto the pathway of decarceration.
I would start with freeing political prisoners, not waiting till the end of Biden's administration. Leonard Peltier has been in prison because of COINTELPRO. Red Fawn Janice has just been released after serving almost 5 years in prison for trying to protect all of our access to clean water. President Biden could stop the illegal flow of oil through the Dakota Access Pipeline, institute community policing. The policing, if any of it is necessary, they should look like us. We need to end qualified immunity and remember to try to heal ourselves. We shall breathe one day, and those will be breaths of freedom.
I remember this quote oftentimes from Audre Lorde that says, we cannot have single issue struggles because we do not live single issue lives. And we cannot combat racial injustice without also working for and towards climate justice and immigrant rights and reproductive rights. When Black people are not free, none of us are free. When Indigenous people are not free, none of us are free. When women are not free, none of us are free. So this idea that we're all working towards an actual collective liberation and ensuring that we leave not one single human being behind.
I want to close with speaking about a land back prophecy. If we were to put land back in indigenous hands, the world could begin to heal. Now that Deb Haaland is the first cabinet level Secretary of the Interior, she has jurisdiction over 75 million acres of land. And a lot of our sacred sites are America's tourist destinations. And indigenous peoples need to be co-stewarding, co-managing, or just flatly give it back to us. If we're going to protect corporate personhood, we certainly should be protecting our most precious rivers, water streams, lands, and sacred sites. That is the true source of all and any real economic value. Anyways, like Linda said, we don't have single issue struggles, but we've got to show up wherever we're called to. It's been my honor as well to meet you, Emerald, and thanks, TC.
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you. Definitely, Linda, it's good seeing you again. You know, my friend said to me a couple of weeks ago, because I was like, really, I having a mental breakdown myself. He's like, you know, you have an old soul. He's like, you know, your trauma aged you. So we think that we're these old people. We think that we're these old, like, you know, oh, I've been there already. I've done all these things, and I'm at a life where I just want to sit around and I want to get retired. And it's like, hello, you're only 29. Pay attention to your mental health. Pay attention to the people around you. And if you really love somebody and their behavior has changed, check on your person. Because if I would have stepped up and checked on my sister a lot sooner, I honestly believe that she would be here. And I know that that's not how it's supposed to go. But for me, personally, that's what I internalize. Even if they don't want to hear it, they're like, get out of my face. I'm just like, all right, I'm going to just be here anyway. That's how I want to close off. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys. And I look forward to everything in the future.
Ríos, en la Xánica es Jiribati Xánica, y soy descendiente del pueblo Xánica. Yo soy natural de Río Tambo, de la comunidad nativa de Betania, que está ubicada en la región Junín. Y mi inicio de vida es una vida desde los propios ejemplos de mis padres. Mis padres fueron grandes líderes del movimiento indígena. Desde muy temprana edad yo tenía una afinidad mucho más de liderazgo, apoyar a mi gente, apoyar a las comunidades nativas. Esta pandemia ha desenmascarado absolutamente la inoperancia de la responsabilidad que tiene el Estado como deber. El gobierno no nos mira, no nos visibiliza, siempre hemos sido invisibles para ellos. Debo decir que fue momentos tan críticos porque en el momento que yo me entero que estoy con COVID y ya estaba con los síntomas fuertes, en esa temporada nosotros como organización y principalmente como mi persona venía afrontando una situación de la muerte de líderes por asesinatos defensores de la Amazonía, ¿no? Arbildo es un líder del pueblo cacatayo. Él ha luchado más de años reclamando derechos, reconocimiento, titulación de su propia comunidad. Sin embargo, pues un 12 de abril, en plena pandemia, fue asesinado. El caso de Arbildo fue una situación pública, latente, en constantes denuncias. Sin embargo, pasaron los 30 días después de la presencia del relator de las Naciones Unidas, pasan el asesinato. Entonces, ¿qué quiere decir? ¿Que los papeles sirvieron? Nada. ¿Cómo está la situación de los niños y la familia en este caso? La familia por ejemplo, de los hermanos ashánicas de Sabeto. En esta situación crítica, entonces no podemos seguir diciendo que sí, el Estado hace su cumplimiento. Falso.
Our story did not begin in slavery. We were enslaved. That was a state of being. That was not who we were as beings.
There are a series of laws that have laid out the structural oppression of my people.
They didn't even think to discriminate against us because they don't think we are even worth being thought of or being centered in the policy decisions that are being made.
Racial justice is climate justice. Climate justice is racial justice. It's always been that way.
I am happy to tell my newfound friends who love climate, who want to work on environmental justice stuff, because it speaks to their heart, that guess what? Every benefit that has been conferred upon you came at the cost of somebody else. Nice to meet you. I'm somebody else.
Not to indict 3 police officers in the shooting death of Breonna Taylor. The 26-year-old.
My thoughts are racing on the highway, daydreaming of a better day. I pray it all would just go away. If we're gonna see a change, I know there's demons that we gotta face. With love, we could rid the hate. Together, you and I, we can try to make amends. And the pain and strife, whether black or white, we all bleed red. With your hand in mine, we can shine a light. Let us stand as one. We can stand as one. We are the ones to make it right. We are the ones to change our lives. We are the ones. We are the ones. We are the ones to make a difference. Put down the guns and social distance. We are the ones. We are the ones. We are. On the news, a tragedy. Trying to catch the wind, can my people breathe? 12 abusing authority. Yeah. In the name of justice, they put the innocent in bondage. I want my people to be free. Together, you and I, we can try to make amends. And the pain is right, whether black or white, we all bleed red. With your hand in mine, we can shine a light. Let us stand as one. We can stand as one. We are the ones to end the fight. Let's show the world we can unite. We are the ones. We are the ones. We are the ones who'll rewrite the story. Let's end the fight and live in glory. We are the ones. We are the ones. We are. We cry, oh, oh, oh. We are the ones.
Critics are calling a proposed pipeline project in Memphis, Tennessee, environmental racism. They say predominantly black neighborhoods are being targeted for the construction of a 49-mile underground crude oil pipeline. They're worried it may devalue land and contaminate the city's drinking water. Former Vice President Al Gore recently went to Memphis to support protesters. The pipeline company says they've held forums with community members to try and address their concerns. We spoke to advocates on both sides of this intensifying fight. This green acre of land in southwest Memphis, Clyde Robinson calls his legacy. It's been in his family since the 1930s.
This land means a whole lot to me.
The 80-year-old is among several Memphis landowners fighting to keep a crude oil pipeline from cutting through their property. He and others, like Scotty Fitzgerald, say they're being robbed of their land and livelihood.
This, to me, it is hurtful. I am offended.
The two energy companies overseeing the project plan to build a pipeline about 4 feet underground. It would stretch 49 miles in order to connect two existing pipelines transporting crude oil to the Gulf Coast. The company, Plains All American, says the Byhalia pipeline is a safe, responsible way to meet the energy needs of our country. And they say they're paying above market price to homeowners for access to their land.
No more oil in our soul.
But environmental activists and many locals say the pipeline companies are pressuring mostly black property owners to build through their land, while also putting Memphis's pristine drinking water at risk of contamination.
We are facing one of the most significant environmental justice and environmentally racist projects in the country's present and history in Memphis, Tennessee.
Justin Pearson co-founded Memphis Community Against the Pipeline.
Memphis is the largest municipality in the country to solely rely on groundwater for its drinking water. This pipeline is being built in an area where there are known breaches in the clay layer. And so there are holes where this contamination would more quickly get to our drinking water source than other places in the city or other places where they may operate pipelines. It is not true that this is safe.
We picked the route with the fewest amount of impacts.
Plains All-American spokeswoman Katie Martin says 97% of landowners have agreed to their project. And she says Plains All-American has talked to researchers and done environmental studies that show the pipeline will not harm Memphis's drinking water, some of the cleanest in the nation, which comes from below ground.
Do you understand people's concerns that they want to be able to protect their land, that they are worried about environmental issues with this pipeline, and that a majority black neighborhood is being targeted here?
I've listened, and our company has listened and tried to hear everyone's concerns. We've routed this in the most responsible way possible. We avoided environmental issues, we avoided landmarks, we avoided densely populated neighborhoods, and we really chose this path because we were able to use the vacant lots. It wasn't because we were targeting one group of people over another.
Plains All-American has offered to pay landowners for easements to access their land to construct the pipeline. Robinson says he was offered $8,000. Fitzgerald says she was offered $3,000. They both refused, and now the pipeline's lawyers have taken them to court.
So eminent domain is used as an absolute last resort. We are still trying to negotiate with every landowner and trying to come to a mutually beneficial agreement with them.
Robinson and Fitzgerald disagree. They say no amount of money will persuade them to allow the pipeline to cut through their land.
How do you feel about how far this has gone?
I feel like you took something from me that was a legacy on down to I have grandchildren. How could you do that? I wouldn't even think of doing another human being like that.
The construction of the pipeline is still in limbo, but once it begins, if it does, it'll take about 9 months. Activists are hoping the Biden administration intervenes since it did stop the Keystone Pipeline project. This is really tough. They're calling it environmental racism because this majority black low-income neighborhood is being targeted, and the people who live there, the ones who oppose this, say, you know, this company thinks we don't have the resources to fight this, but they say they're being underestimated, that they will fight it.
What is the story of Memphis? What is the story of pipelines in your community? And what about the connection to other Black and brown communities?
Our city is 64% Black and African American, descendants of enslaved people for the most part. When we think about environmental injustice in our history with pipelines, you have to connect that to poverty. There have been communities that have been redlined to have predominantly Black people in them. And those communities have also been deprived of economic justice. And so there aren't a lot of jobs in those communities. Those same places that were redlined to be this way, those same places are the ones where you have the most fossil fuel infrastructure, is because it's an exploitation of the poverty. A place that's been disinvested in, you don't think has enough power to fight corporations like this. And in fact, they even called our community the path of least resistance. But see, they don't know us. We are indeed the path of resilience.
I'm a little bit concerned. We're leaning on politicians right now to make change for us, but you do have this thing called executive order that's being used a lot. Do you feel like that's something that we should call for the Biden administration?
Yeah, I think there's something that can be done at each level of government in this fight in particular. The Biden-Harris administration could rescind the nationwide permit 12 that was used by Byhalia Pipeline, but also used by other pipelines to run through and run over communities without their input.
I feel like that may just come too late, though. That's my fear. Oil companies are moving very fast. You know, I actually had to give my uncle a talk because he took the check from the oil company. And, you know, he has his own circumstances. So it's kind of exploitation in my opinion.
In Memphis, we're talking about a community where the average income is about $26,000 a year, and 97% African American. And so the fact that folks were approached by a company who offered them 100, 1,000, how much ever financial resources for an easement of their land, without knowing the full ramifications that the water would be destroyed, without knowing the full ramifications that property values would go down. It was an exploitation of the poverty, right? Like, are we attacking like systemic barriers of poverty that say some people's hourly wage should be $7.25 an hour? That's what it still is in Memphis. Our average lifespan of Black folks is 10 years less than white folks. It's not accidents of birth, right? These are policy decisions that are being made. When you think about Legionnaire's disease that a lot of the children in Flint have, right? That was somebody's decision to poison those kids, right? We can't separate out the real people impact based on policy decisions. And if we aren't, those of us who particularly have means, or those of us who have privilege, aren't using our voices for those who are the most marginalized in our communities, then we are perpetuating the injustices as well.
Where I realized I was a part of the problem. As an NBA player, basketball pro athlete, even though I'm making millions of dollars, I'm a part of the problem because I'm teaching younger kids and, you know, different viewers that this is what being Black is about.
Like, somewhere there was a narrative created that we could only be certain things, right? And it just so happened that people make billions off of us doing those certain things, right? And so doctor and lawyer and nurse and radio host and all the architect and those things dissipated. Why were those opportunities not provided to us? It is incumbent upon people like yourself to say, how do I use this platform to do that work too? I just appreciate that so much.
What is the role of corporations and industry?
I kind of side with what Biden's doing right now. I just hope he holds his word with the direction of even the tax structure. It's going to hit me like no other. Like, seriously, I was pissed off when I first heard the news, but it goes back to the corporate structure just being off from the jump. If I have to pay my dues, I just hope my tax money goes to the right hands. That's my whole thing.
Corporations need to recruit, hire, retain, and advance talent of color to be a part of decision making by reducing the 4-year degree requirement. If you have a 4-year degree requirement, but only 20% of African Americans have a 4-year degree, that means 80% of us cannot apply to the job. What does that mean for us to say it isn't just about what's good for shareholders and finding some in between shareholders and government? Is to say what gets us closer to justice.
Why does Memphis seem to be a hub for like factory workers and things like that?
In the case of Memphis, is the history of America, right? It is that the descendants of enslaved people will do the most menial task and menial work. They will be paid the least. And there's been no true disruption to this since, I would argue, Dr. King was assassinated here. And so now we have an environmental justice movement building that is a movement about racism, but it is also a movement about exploitation of South Memphis. And why is it that South Memphis is being neglected? And why has it been neglected for so long? And who's responsible for that? And who's responsible for changing that? We got to start asking those policy questions because they have implications for people while building power in the communities that have been disempowered. We got to be in those places and take what we got and invest it there, right? Not necessarily financially, but intellectually and educationally and academically and socially, invested in those places. And then you start to see the connections get made. I literally, one lady came to a rally with a sign that said, "The more I learn about environmental racism, the more I believe it killed my mother." Right? Mom's been dead 4 years. Never made the connection that the oil refinery might have something to do with the toxins that were in the air, had something to do with the lung cancer that her mama died from and that her auntie got. Right? But that's happening now. And so because that's happening, like what begins to change when we make that knowledge common? Power, people power, and nothing can stop people power.
I've been in New York now for 10 years. A lot of people warned me. They were scared. They was like, you sure you want to go to New York? It's hard in New York. It's hard. Y'all heard that before? Yeah, they said it's hard. And I ain't really understand what hard was until I went to church in New York and put it together. Because the pastor started complaining about his landlord. I was like, oh, it's that hard. Wow, that's different. You know, like the pastor called his landlord the devil in the pulpit. I was like, wow, this is different. You know, it felt wrong. I'm like, I'm here for Jesus. This feel like Ray Charles leading the blind, you know? Like even Jesus is broke in New York? How'd they do that? Wow. I don't know. I'm from Atlanta. The pastors are rich, you know? They got several houses, cars, helicopters, credit card fraud, but Jesus is rich. And that's the Jesus I want to serve, okay? Whew, I went to church in New York. I started considering a new religion. I was like, what is Buddha and Muhammad doing? They broke too. I can't do this. Can't do that, broke Jesus. New York is hard. It is hard. You got to have more than one job. Like I couldn't just do this. Couldn't just follow the dream. No. You got to follow the money. So I braid hair too. Anybody, where the black women at in here? Okay, y'all know what it means to get your hair braided. I mean, I feel a little self-conscious for saying it and my hair not braided because people like, oh, you braid hair, do you? But I love braiding black women hair because people don't understand when black women got their hair done, it's a whole nother vibe. It's a whole nother experience, right? Okay? All of a sudden, she got superpowers, you know what I'm saying? She bilingual. You call up like, what you wearing tonight? She be like, my hair, bitch, let's go. And it's just... And I love that because I contribute to that, you know, and I make it extra black when I braid hair, okay? We burn incense, okay? We listen to Solange, Don't Touch My Hair, yeah, all that, yes, right? And then at the end, my favorite part, when I do my clients' hair, we do this thing where we celebrate. We be like, yes, you look good. You look good. Woo, my clients come get their hair done. Sometimes they don't know how it works though, you know? They come in with pictures of Beyonce, Rihanna. They're like, oh, you gonna make me look like this? I'm like, this not how that works, you know? They get their hair braided, we celebrate, we be like, yes, you look good. They were like, oh, do I look like this? And I'll be like, your face stayed the same. And that's how that works. But this is my new job, y'all. Hey, climate change. Hey.
Bringing kids in this world is scary. I'm thinking about buying my boys a kayak, you know? Can you imagine somebody taking a kayak to a shop and go? That's stupid.
And I want to tell you just a report from these white climate crisis rooms, what they worry about. Straws, sea turtles, black people. It's not a good order.
I went to Howard, so I made my decision and stuck to it, okay? I just want to brag, though. Howard had a swim team. Y'all might want to get on top of that.
I'm already crying. Then the police there. I'm calming down. Police walking. They too used to shoots, man. They walk me out to the car. They like, hey, was it right here? I'm like, they still in the area. Why are you trying to get me to Tekashi myself?
So I braid hair too. Anybody, where the black women at in here? I feel a little self-conscious for saying it and my hair not braided because people like, oh, you braid hair, do you?
A lot of beautiful black women in here, nice hair, but you gotta watch those sea levels. If it get too high, everybody gonna have to go natural.
They were strategic in making sure that these particular industries were built in certain neighborhoods. I ain't never seen a train go through the suburbs. I've never seen an industry been birthed out of Beverly Hills. So they were strategic years ago, understanding what the effects would be for my children to come.
You should be mad. We're here to make you mad. We're here to rile you up.
Who went to the city commission meetings to allow these people to build these industries in our neighborhoods? Right. Who taught us to go to these meetings to fight for them not to come in our neighborhoods? They doing in the white neighborhoods. I can't even catch the bus in the white neighborhoods.
Let's figure out how we organize. Let's figure out our districts so we can be organized voting wise and make sure that everybody here is central in relation to vote.
Please explain to us this catastrophe unfolding.
The catastrophe here in Michigan and in Detroit in particular is really the catastrophe of environmental racism. We know that Severstal Steel, some of y'all might not have heard the name of the large Russian company that took over the steel downriver. We know they just didn't have one violation or two violations or 5 violations, or 10 violations, or 20 violations, nor 30. Last year they had 36 violations of emissions regulations.
True gangsters are killing us silently. Are you saying that, Doc?
I'm gonna say it like you said, Rev. The true gangsters, they're not in the streets, they're in the suites.
This is not just the issue of, oh, this happening to black people or communities of color. This is a health issue. This is an economic issue.
There's this movement in America to make everybody colorblind and to make it seem like it's not black people that's being affected because we're all human. But there is a certain sector of humans that look the same that are being affected. So that's bullshit. It's not affecting Ashley H and Ashley C the same way it's affecting Keisha. Okay.
The name of the summit is called We Shall Breathe. Can you tell us your thoughts on why we can't breathe?
We have policies in place, social policies, economic policies, environmental policies that have suffocated the growth and the vitality of black and brown communities for generations. Latino children are 40% more likely to die from asthma than the general population. And that is a crime. It's important that this summit's called We Shall Breathe, because right now our children can't breathe.
When we think about how New York City has been shaped and how that shaping has been intentional, when we think about the location of bus depots, the location of waste treatment plants, in a lot of ways, policy has been used to facilitate ease for communities and comfort and facilitate a better life. And that has come at the cost for other communities when we think about Black and brown communities, Asian communities, Latinx communities, right? Policy, when we think about who wields that as a weapon and how it's used.
Our communities end up being the only ones to help and support each other when leadership fails to do that for our communities. And so we come together under grassroots activism and we rally for change. You know, we're at a moment where that activism is going to change our policy for our future.
Who has their hands in policy, right? Tell me from your perspective, what is the role of corporations and industry and others that are engaged in policy?
It's very concerning the level of power that corporations have right now when it comes to the power of money and capitalism and the power that they have with their outsized donations for political campaigns. We need to fix this. They do play a role. Businesses play a role, but they shouldn't reap the outsized benefits from our climate policies if they're built on public-private partnerships. We've seen what happens when we leave it up to businesses and capitalisms to have free reign to solve our problems. They just make the problems worse.
Voting rights and access to the polls and filibustering will hinder progress in this area. We must continue to fight for equitable access and citizenship rights, right? So I just wonder if that brings up anything else that you'd like to name in regards to what's happening in Georgia.
I mean, you need equitable access to all forms of power, economic power, political power. And right now, for this inequity to be institutionalized, to continue to be institutionalized the way it is, and not get the pushback that it should be having, for it not to happen in Georgia and for it not to happen in Texas and other parts of our country where it's threatening to domino, is something that's really sad and difficult to see in my lifetime, and for me to explain to my children. We need to continue the effort that was made in Georgia to get that vote and continue that power that was pulled together in order to stop these civil rights bashing from happening.
If anything, right, the access is really key. And I think this is, I think another way of really understanding that access has no bounds, right? That access to environment, access to decision-making tables, access to the polls, access to all of these things is such a key issue. Access is such a barrier to us in a lot of different ways that we can't even begin to think about the solutions until we knock down these barriers.
Let's talk about how pollution, the pandemic, police brutality, and poverty are all connected to policy.
Policy, I think, is really the tool when we think about all of these other P's, right? When we think about the pandemic, when we think about pollution and poverty and all of these other pieces, right? That policy can be a really great tool that can really flip some of these P's sort of on their head, right?
I mean, it seems like such a dry word when you say policy versus like activism or oppression. But policy is the manifestation of what comes with our political power. It can either be a diminished political power with policies like in Georgia that are happening right now, or we really can't have policies that will support our communities for the future. We really do need to fight for policies that uplift us.
President Biden has invited 40 world leaders to the Leaders Summit on Climate on April 22nd, which is Earth Day. There are 6 key themes that were included in the announcement. What key themes should be prioritized and centered?
Is their focus going to be on communities and people, frontline communities? Is it going to be on the impacts that these themes are having on people's livelihoods? Or are we going to go back to prioritizing corporations and businesses? In a lot of ways, we need to look forward on the economic benefits of climate action, not on the economic risks of ending fossil fuel pollution. We need to do it in the next 10 years. We've been told by the UN that that's what we have. That's the time that we have in order to make significant changes. And so in order for us to have a chance of limiting our global warming down to 1.5 or Celsius or 2.2 degrees Celsius, we've got to make sure these national governments are advancing ambitious goals and resilience. And that's what we want to see when they come together.
As the Biden administration approaches the 100-day mark on April 30th, what demands or recommendations do you want to put forth?
We need to bring more communities and more frontline communities to the table, the decision-making table, the room where it happens. We really have a lot of significant demands when it comes to water. We want to rescind the Trump administration's dirty water rule, to make cars more efficient with their gas mileage. We need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by setting strict limits of air quality standards for our health, for our children's health. And we need to halt issuance of waivers to environmental pollution laws that have been allowed since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. We don't have any reason why, we never did, why corporations should be allowed to freely pollute during the pandemic. It was a catastrophe that this was allowed to happen.
Mark Magana with Green Latinos, Taylor Morton with We Act. Thank you so much for joining us for the We Shall Breathe Summit.
I am originally from Louisiana. All right now, I like that. When Katrina hit New Orleans, 1,833 people lost their lives. Now, if you can go to a place that if they were hit by a Category 1 storm, it would have more disastrous effects. I said, well, where is that place? I'll be there. They said the Hampton Roads, Norfolk area.
A rock from space slammed into what is now Virginia, and besides really ruining the days of a couple of dinosaurs, it also left an intense crater, which made the water around what is now Norfolk deep.
There's probably not another locality that's facing the challenges and the threats around water.
I'm not trying to see my area on the news talking about body counts and we can't find this person, we can't find these people.
The naval base in Norfolk equates for the largest percentage of any industry. There's also the Langley Air Force Base, NASA.
But all this military infrastructure is going underwater. The government must be working on fixing this show, right? No, my friends.
The flood wall stops where the public housing area begins.
St. Paul's, like many public housing communities around the country, is more prone to climate flooding than the rest of the city, further complicating the question of what to do about public housing and families who need housing support.
So you're looking at multiple billions of dollars to try to build a living with water situation.
Got to rebuild it back in a way that lives with the water.
So they offer Section 8 vouchers and things like that to get people to move other places.
People are running out of places to go.
Hold up, how are we the ones being hurt the worst by a climate crisis that we contribute to the least?
We used to mainly smell car fumes, and we didn't smell them anymore because we were growing things.
You spend your life in trying to transform it so that privileged people can then just push you right out? My God.
It's a long process. It's like you say, it takes a whole village.
We understand that this is an issue that affects us more than everybody else.
Climate justice and environmental justice, all of it is centered on racial justice.
We don't have any other choice but to figure this out for our future.
Yes, you're in harm's way, but yes, you can be the solution to the rest of the country and the world to fix this climate crisis.
Our president and founder, Reverend Yearwood, has always coined and said this. He said, either we shape policy or policy shapes us. And he's always said, demonstration without legislation leads to frustration. So as we're having these conversations as we have coined the 5 Ps, the 5th one of that is policy. Can you just let everyone know who you are?
My name is Elizabeth Yampierre. I'm the executive director of UPROS, co-chair of the Climate Justice Alliance. I am a climate justice warrior.
What does it mean when we say we shall breathe, and next will be followed by why can't we breathe?
Terrence, that's a really important question, particularly those of us who come out of the environmental justice movement, because many of us went into this movement because we wanted to exercise our right to breathe. Literally, breath was being taken away from us. I'm glad that you're calling it that, because literally that's what we're talking about, the fight for our breath. And literally, wealth was built on the backs of our communities, and our life was only essential to the extent that it could build wealth for people who are now who are still fighting against us and who are still perpetuating policy and practices that are taking breath from our communities.
What are some of the stories around policy in your communities that are stopping us from breathing or stopping us from doing what we need to do?
So we have a long history engaged in policy. We know that unless we can regulate it, unless we can legislate it, unless we can put it on the books, there is no guarantee that we're going to be protected. You're seeing in Georgia right now the undoing of protections to make sure that Black people don't have voters' rights. Right now in 2021, you're seeing that. So clearly, people who don't care about our lives understand the power of policy, the power of legislation, and they want to be able to legislate racism, right? That's what the Jim Crow laws were, legislated racism. So all of us really need to be aligned and working with each other so that we're really clear about what we want for our communities 10 years from now, 20 years from now, so that we can survive the recurrent extreme weather events that are heading our way at a speed that we can't even imagine.
As the Biden administration is approaching the 100-day mark, April the 30th, what demands or recommendations do you want to put forth?
So that's a great question, because everyone all over the country is looking at what they're doing. They're looking, at the 40% of resources that they want to move to frontline communities. The current narrative sets 40% as the goal, which implies a ceiling, and that's the minimum of what they should do, because again, it's literally 40% against a baseline of decades of massive underinvestment on top of centuries of land and labor theft and enslavement and exploitation of people of color and BIPOC communities. Now, what we need to find out is whether they have the political will and whether or not they are willing to commit to going as far as possible to take apart the systemic racism that got us to where we are right now.
I love how you say that 40% is not the ceiling, it's just the base. You got to account for everything that you extracted, everything that you have taken, everything that you have exploited. So 40% won't even catch us up.
And they're always asking us to compromise on justice, compromise on lives. And we have been moving slowly in this country to make the privilege comfortable. It's for their comfort and our lives, literally. And so it's going to require a different kind of thinking and a different kind of courage.
Now I want to talk about that there are corporations who claim to be doing the right thing, right? So what is the role of these corporations and industries as it relates to climate change?
Well, corporations have been benefiting from public welfare for generations. They have been subsidized heavily. We want to work with businesses that are rethinking their corporate structure, that are thinking about their capitalist models. We look at businesses like Patagonia working really hard to think about what is a responsible, sustainable business that treats workers and communities with love and respect. You look at a company like Amazon that is dropping money in the climate movement while at the same time abusing its workers and engaging in practices that violate human rights, right? There is an inconsistency. And I think that the culture of this country has been that if you engage in bad behavior, all you need to do is pay a little bit of money, and then that is going to go away and you're going to look like a good player. That people can see through that. We're now living in an age where information is shared really quickly, and so they can't hide under that cloud anymore. Any business that thinks that they're going to continue the way they are is not going to survive.
President Biden and his administration, as we know, he will be inviting leaders on the Summit for Climate on April 22nd, Earth Day. What things should be prioritized and centered?
World leaders need to prioritize the needs and the impact of climate change on the global South. They need to engage in dialogue with community leaders. And when I mean community, I'm talking about people of African and indigenous ancestry. If you look at what's happening in Africa, in the continent of Africa, and the River Niger, that's deep, serious contamination that has destroyed the ecology, the health, and the survivability of people because of U.S. corporations. They're responsible for making reparations for that. And they can't just be dropping dollars to support their solutions,
right?
Their false solutions, which is what they'll do, because they also confuse you with the funding. They'll say, oh, we've put this many dollars in addressing climate change. And when you break down the money and you follow it, you know that this percentage went to corporations and this percentage went to
exactly. Same old game. How is pollution, the pandemic, police brutality, poverty, all of these things, how are all these things connected to policy?
You know, the climate justice is grounded in racial justice and equity and the needs of our communities. And our communities don't have the luxury of choosing between one issue or the other. I would discourage people from getting their solutions from people who don't live where they live, who don't look like them, who are using them to support their agenda, and to trust that those of us who are descendants of the civil rights movement are working really hard to come up with recommendations and policy recommendations that honor them, that honor our families, and that honor our ancestors. I would ask folks to have hope and to support the folks that are literally working 24/7 for justice in this country.
We thank you. And we thank you for the love. And that's the point I wanted to make. The love that you have, not only for yourself, but for our people.
Ashe, thank you so much. Really honored to be in community with you all the time. So de corazón, gracias. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a climate change. Oh, it's a real cold game. I feel a climate change. The hood will never be the same. I said, I feel a climate change. Treat us different, but we always been the same. It's a cold night, a real cold night. Better get right before you lose your life. Brutality, that is what I speak of. My people are dying. Do you really think up get us? He say he can't breathe. Let's get up. You say you for the people, but you really been against us. You don't know how it feels. Every up time, I jump up in my ride. I worry about my life. This shit ain't right. I wanna live life. If you stand for what they cop did, you might as well did that crime. R.I.P. George Floyd. This the police did. Now the people making noise. Peaceful protests not working no more. Get up on your feet and stand for something, little bro. We gotta let them know we are people too. You say it ain't no proof. What more we need to do? It's all up on the net. What more we need to prove? Treat us like some dirt. What more we need to do? It's a climate change. Oh, it's a real cold game. I feel a climate change. The hood will never be the same. I said, I feel a climate change. Treat us different, but we always been the same. It's a cold night, a real cold night. Better get right before you lose your life. It's a climate change. Oh, it's a real cold game. It's a climate change. Oh, it's a real cold game. Really sick, man.